I'm Amy from Doodle Dog Designs. I have a Santa pattern that I want to hook. I'm going to make his coat red, but I want it to be a mottled red where it looks like it's aged and gotten some faded and some dirty looking. So I want it to have different colors in different areas. So a variegated look is what I want. So I am going to take this piece of plain natural colored wool. This has already been felted in my washing machine. And I'm going to use 3 different colors of red. These are Cushing's dyes. And I'm using terracotta, which is this one here. And I've got mulberry over here and scarlet, which is this one right here. So I've got 3 different shades of red that I'm going to use all on one piece. And I might, depending on how it looks, I might throw in some walnut to give it more of an antique look if any of it is too vivid. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wool and I'm going to soak it in some water. While my wool is pre-soaking, I have gathered my supplies that I'm going to use for this project. I have this stainless steel pan. It's a restaurant supply type of pan. I actually got it at the Amish store near me. And I'm going to use that to cook my wool in on the stove to set the dye. And I also have another pot that I will use to mix each of my dyes in. I have 3 jars to store my dyes in before I pour them into my pot. Then I have a stirring spoon and I have measuring spoons, vinegar, and my dye. My measuring spoons, I have 2 sets. This is a regular set, and then this is a set with small measurements. It goes down to 1/64 of a teaspoon. And I'll put a link in the description below to these. They're very handy for dyeing. And all of these dye supplies I only use for dyeing. I don't use them for cooking food of any kind. So I'm going to start by mixing my dyes. I'm going to start with the scarlet. It comes in a little baggie here, and you want to make sure that it's mixed well before you start if you're not using the entire bag. 1 package works for about a pound of wool, which I found to be normally about a yard. I'm doing 3/8 of a yard, so I don't want to use the whole package. Where my measuring spoons come in handy, I'm going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon of this dye. That was a little bit of a heaping 1/4 of a teaspoon. Turn the water on, and I'm going to let that come to a simmer and dissolve that powdered dye in this pot. I'm tilting the pan just to make sure that all of the dye powder is dissolved. It looks like it is. So I'm going to remove it from the heat, and then I'm going to pour it into one of my jars. Now I'm going to wash this pan before I do the next color. Next, I'm going to mix up the terracotta. Again, I'm going to use the same amount, just a little bit of a heaping 1/4 of a teaspoon. And finally, I'm going to do the mulberry. I'm feeling like this is a lot more purpley than the other shades. So I'm going to add a little bit of this black walnut, hopefully to tone it down a little bit. Don't want a lot though. I'm going to use just the 1/64 teaspoon. And that's a heaping 1/64 teaspoon. My stove does have this middle burner here that I'm going to use for this. You can see that it will be great to put my pan on. If you didn't have a middle burner, you could use just a couple of your burners. That would work as well. So I have put my wool in my pan and covered it with water. And I'm going to go ahead and mix in the vinegar. If you mix in the vinegar before you start dyeing, then it helps the dye grab onto the wool really fast right where it's placed, and that's what I want in this instance. I want it to absorb right away right where I put it. I don't want it to move around, so I'm going to just put some vinegar all the way around, maybe like 1/3 of a cup, but I'm not measuring it. And then I'm going to mix it in. I want it to be everywhere. Now I'm going to move this over into the middle where I've got that middle burner. And I will turn it on. I want to heat up the water a little bit before I pour my dye in there. It's got a little bit of steam rising from it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start pouring. I'm going to start with the scarlet because I would like that to be most of the color. I'm just going to pour it. And next I have the terracotta. If I had things with a spout, I think this would be easier. It's a little bit hard to pour out of this jar. And finally, I've got my mulberry, and that jar is, since it's the one I made last, the jar is still pretty hot. I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to dip these areas that don't have any, they're a little bit above the water, so I'm going to dip them in so the dye can get everywhere. I don't want any white spots remaining for this, but I don't want to mix. I definitely don't want any mixing going on. Now I'm going to let this simmer. You can see that the water is mostly clear now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I will let it cool a little bit in the pan before I take it out. After the wool was cool, I rinsed it until the water ran clear. Then I'm going to wring out the excess water and hang it up to dry. My wool is dry now, and you can really see the variation in colors. There are some spots that didn't get any color on them. I would say that those were underneath when I had it scrunched up. So if I was doing it again, I would maybe try to scrunch it a little less to try to make sure that all of the wool gets some color to it. It turned out a little bit too bright for what I want to use it for, so I'm going to take it back to the dye pot now. This is the black walnut, and I will just use a little bit of it. I won't use very much at all because I just want to give it an antique age look, and that will also help darken up these light spots, but it will darken everything overall. So I will go put this in some water to soak, and I will get everything else ready. I'm going to use just a smidgen a 1/32 teaspoon. I like to add the walnut to things to tone them down, but I always start with a very small amount. I can always add more dye, but you can't take it back off. So I like to just add a little bit and see how it looks, and then add a little bit more if I still need it. Okay, it is now dry after I did the walnut dye. You can see the white splotches are all gone, and it has toned it down a little bit. It's a little less bright, vivid, and I think this is going to work well for my project. In this split screen here on the right, you can see the wool that I added the walnut dye to, and on the left is the first dye bath. If you like this video, you'll probably also enjoy my other wool dyeing videos.